Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Rental Regrets. As always, I am your host, Victory Nub, and today we're going to be taking a look at the game WWF WrestleMania Challenge. Developed by Rare, published by LJN, and released in the United States in November of 1990. The game was designed by Tim Stamper, one of the Stamper brothers that founded Rare along with his brother Chris. The game features wrestlers from the tail end of the Golden Era, including Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, The Ultimate Warrior, Rick Rude, Macho Man Randy Savage, The Big Boss Man, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and a specially designed generic wrestler that acts as the player surrogate. The original working title for the game was WWF Survivor Series, as the game does feature a version of the match type. However, despite the roster availability, teams are comprised of only 3 wrestlers each. The game also features a championship mode, in which players must use the generic wrestler to run through a gauntlet of all other wrestlers to win the WWF Championship. Each wrestler comes with a unique moveset, including many of their finishing moves. However, some wrestlers were not given their actual finishers. In the case of Andre the Giant, who had a series of finishers that never really stuck, he simply has no finisher at all. I have no information on the critical or commercial performance. I'm sure it sold well enough that LJN chose to continue licensing WWF games, or vice versa, and eventually they would publish the trilogy of Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis titles that we've sampled at least 2 of on the channel already. That's all the notes that I had. We're looking at this game for a few reasons today. This was the first wrestling game that I ever played. I think I rented it around the time that I started watching wrestling as a kid. I remember liking it, but not recognizing a few of the wrestlers. At the point I started watching, Andre the Giant had already retired due to his declining health, and Rick Rude was let go in 1990 after an argument with Vince McMahon. Rude was eventually hired by WCW and wrestled a few more years until suffering a back injury in 1994 that effectively ended his wrestling career. I am recording this episode on July 31st of 2025. The last 10 days were a significant and fairly somber week, not just for wrestling fans, but anyone that grew up in the 1980s, like myself. A trio of individuals with some level of significance during the 80s passed away, and I thought I could spend the episode sharing some memories. And yes, I did write a bunch of this out to help coalesce my thoughts. The individuals that we'll be talking about are Malcolm Jamal Warner, who passed away at 54, John Michael Osborne, more famously known as Ozzy Osbourne, who passed away at 76, and finally Terry Bollea, more famously known as Hulk Hogan, who passed away at 71. And unfortunately, all 3 were involved, either directly or indirectly, with events or actions that could be considered pretty reprehensible. My talking about these people and these subjects is not meant to condemn or condone their actions, simply to point out that no one is perfect, and that we each have the capacity not only to forgive individuals for their wrongdoing, but to acknowledge their mistakes while also appreciating the importance of the positive contributions they made in their lifetimes. So if you're listening to this episode and you're already upset that I'll be sharing happy memories I have about any of these people, just remember, you're not perfect. You never will be, and humility is a far more honorable pursuit than a position of moral superiority. Malcolm Jamal Warner unfortunately passed away on July 20th while vacationing in Costa Rica. He apparently drowned while struggling against the surf with his daughter. Authorities did observe Warner and his daughter struggling and responded as fast as they could. Warner's daughter was rescued by a surfer that was nearby at the time and took her to safety. So thankfully she did survive. Warner was most widely recognized for his role as Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, which ran from 1984 to 1992. Theo was originally based on Bill Cosby's real-life son, Ennis Cosby, who was tragically murdered in an attempted robbery on January 16th of 1997. Ennis also served as the inspiration for Bill Cosby's 1983 stand-up special, Bill Cosby Himself, which was the conceptual inspiration for The Cosby Show. So it all ties together. I know that my family used to love the Bill Cosby Himself stand-up special. It was one of the best stand-up routines of all time. And I know that's something that's hard to say given what we know about Cosby today, but the material itself has a timeless quality that's hard to deny. The Cosby Show was a huge show in the 1980s, and that is putting it very mildly. It was the first TV show in history to garner the #1 ranking by Nielsen's rating system for 5 seasons, all 5 occurring consecutively from 1985 to 1989. Perhaps more importantly, it was the first show of its kind to portray a successful, affluent, and stable African-American family on television. As hard as it may be to believe in 2025, that was a huge deal. I remember watching the show as a kid. I don't know if I can tell you specific storylines or jokes. I remember that Cliff Huxtable, the character that Bill Cosby played, was the son of a jazz musician, so they used that as a vehicle to feature musicians on the show periodically. I guess my lasting memory of the show would be that I loved the theme song. It was performed by Bobby McFerrin, the guy who wrote Don't Worry, Be Happy. I always loved that theme song. Unfortunately, it's like most TV shows that were big in the mid to late 80s. I remember watching them, but I couldn't tell you anything more specific. Family Ties, Growing Pains, Alf, Who's the Boss? I know I watched all of them. I would be very hard-pressed to relay a single episode's plot. I don't remember them. I just remember watching them, and that's it. I may be misremembering this. I want to say Warner gave the commencement speech at my oldest sister's high school graduation. How in the world did they manage to get him to show up for a commencement in Northern Virginia? I don't know. He's not even from Virginia. I just remember him being involved somehow in my sister's graduation. And I was 9 at the time, so who knows? Maybe I'm not remembering it correctly at all. Unfortunately, you can't speak about The Cosby Show anymore without speaking about Bill Cosby's sexual assault convictions. In 2018, Cosby was found guilty on 3 counts of aggravated incidental assault, stemming from more than 60 allegations of rape, drug-facilitated sexual assault, child sexual abuse, and harassment that allegedly occurred between 1965 and 2008. He was sentenced to serve a 3 to 10 year prison sentence. The conviction was overturned in 2021 and he was released from prison. However, 9 additional suits have been filed against Cosby as recently as 2023. For those of us in the US, we live in a country where the accused are considered innocent until proven guilty, but given the quantity of accusations and the disturbing pattern that has emerged in nearly every alleged incident, in which Cosby would spike women's drinks and assault them while they were unconscious, it is hard not to assume that Bill Cosby is guilty of some, if not all, of the accusations. Malcolm Jamal Warner has gone on record saying that Cosby's actions have stained the legacy of The Cosby Show, and frankly, they have. Thankfully, no such accusations exist about Warner, but the association with Cosby is hard to avoid mentioning, especially when you're talking about The Cosby Show. Ozzy Osbourne, shifting gears now, passed away on July 22nd due to ongoing health issues stemming from Parkinson's disease. He did do a farewell performance in early July. I don't know if they had suspected that he was probably getting very close to passing away, but he did one final show. I believe it was in Birmingham, which is his hometown. And unfortunately, because the Parkinson's had advanced so much, he could not stand. He had to perform the entirety of the show seated in a special throne that they had designed for him. And you could see during the performance, on multiple occasions, he tried standing up and he just couldn't do it. Ozzy was a co-founder of the band Black Sabbath in 1968, one of the pioneers of heavy metal music, and a 2006 inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Black Sabbath's music was inspired by their blue-collar upbringing in the industrialized area of Birmingham, England, and a curiosity in the public's interest in horror and scary movies. In April of 1979, due to ongoing creative differences and difficulty managing various substance abuse issues, not just with Ozzy, but the rest of the band, guitarist Tommy Iommi fired Ozzy from Black Sabbath. Ozzy would go on to have a long, sustained solo career, recording 13 solo albums and selling a combined 100 million albums between Black Sabbath and his solo work. Ozzy would also gain some mainstream success as a reality TV star, appearing in The Osbournes from 2002 to 2005 alongside his wife Sharon and his kids Kelly and Jack. I won't pretend that I ever was a huge fan of Ozzy Osbourne. I like some of his songs, but I never bought any of his albums. My first significant exposure to him would have been Ozfest. Ozfest was the yearly festival tour that would take place over the summer months and ran in some form from 1996 to 2018. The tour experienced its largest commercial success in the early 2000s, which is when I actually attended. I'm not saying that I was responsible for the commercial success, I'm just saying that's when I actually went to him. I know for certain I went to the 2002 Ozfest and the 2003. For some reason, I was looking at lineups and it didn't jive with what I remembered. I might have gone to 2001 as well. In 2002, I think I went with a friend of the channel, Over 9000. In 2003, I went with the younger of my two sisters. I do remember those days with some clarity. First and foremost, summer festivals in Virginia in all black clothing is a terrible idea. The 2002 Ozfest that I attended occurred in August, so it was hot as hell out there. And believe me, it didn't stop anyone from wearing black shirts, black pants, black boots, black nail polish, black skirts, black hose, black hair, and so on. Devotion is standing in direct sunlight from 9 a.m. until sundown wearing all black, but people did it, and it was a day-long festival. It started, if it wasn't 9, it was like 8 a.m. They started really early. 2002 was notable because the date that I attended, August 15th, was the day before, or excuse me, it was the day after the lead singer of Drowning Pool, Dave Williams, suffered complications from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and passed away at age 30. If you're not familiar, Drowning Pool was the band behind the song Bodies. The name Bodies doesn't ring a bell. The opening chorus is pretty familiar to most people. It goes a little something like this. Let the bodies hit the floor. 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 His death weighed pretty heavily on several of the bands that performed that day, with several dedicating their sets to Williams. That year, Ozzy was performing with his solo band, and his lead guitarist, Zakk Wylde, was pulling double duty, performing an opening set with his band, Black Label Society, which he would do multiple tours in that fashion, so he was a workhorse. 2003, I remember being one of the reasons that I stopped going to concerts with any regularity, and I'll go into that in a second. The first year that I went, we just got general lawn seats, and it was a slope venue, so you could see the main stage just fine, no matter where you were seated. They also had second and third stages at most of these events that hosted smaller acts that were just getting national exposure for the first time, usually touring on the first album they ever released with any commercial success. In 2003, my sister and I got what they called pit tickets, which were in the orchestra pit area right in front of the stage. We were maybe 15 or 20 feet from the main stage for the end of the show. Throughout the show, whenever the bands would finish, they would throw stuff into the audience, which is pretty standard. You know, drumsticks, boxes full of guitar picks, whatever wasn't nailed down or expensive. The shirt off of the lead singer's back, if he happened to be wearing a shirt, he'd throw that in the audience, whatever. I remember that my sister and I both tried to grab some stuff when they were throwing items out in the crowd, but had no luck. System of a Down came out and did their set, and this was like the second or third last act before Ozzy came out. At that point, I was pretty beat. Again, the venue opened at like 8 a.m. and there were bands performing right off the rip, so we got there basically when they opened. We're there all the way up until the end of the night, which was 11 o'clock, midnight. You know, bands on the main stage basically did a full set, and you had 7 or 8 bands that came out, so it was a very long day. At that point, I was just spent, and I was not interested in wasting any energy fighting over, you know, a couple of guitar picks or a stick, no matter who was using them. Anyway, System of a Down finished their set, and the band started throwing stuff into the crowd, and we were on the left side of the stage where the bassist Chavo was performing, and he took his wristband off and chucked it out in the crowd. I made the world's feeblest attempt to catch it. Like, my hand was down by waist level with an open palm facing up, and that was about all I was willing to do. And sure enough, the damn thing landed right in my hand. As soon as it hit, just this dawning apprehension of, holy shit, I caught it. So I closed my hand and stuck it in my pocket, because the rest of the crowd was like going nuts trying to grab anything they could. And they were all searching the ground because no one caught it. So they were all like, it must have fallen down on the ground somewhere. And they couldn't find it. Yeah, because I had already hidden it and I didn't say a word. A few minutes later, after everyone had given up, I leaned over to my sister and said, hey, look what I caught. She couldn't believe it because I played it so nonchalant. I caught it and like stuck it in my pocket, like just like a one motion, man. I had a good night. I think that was the year that Black Sabbath reunited for a tour, but I might be mistaken. I know that one year I went, it was Ozzy doing his solo act, and one year he was performing again with Black Sabbath, but I don't remember which year was which. Earlier in the day, we were over at the second stage, and the headliner for that particular group of bands was Mushroom Head. They had just released their first album, and they were out promoting it. They did a 4-song set, and I'll never forget it because the sound tech, who was supposed to get everything set up for them, screwed up the speaker levels, and they were significantly louder than every band that came out for Mushroom Head. And in the middle of the set, I heard my eardrums pop. For lack of a better description, I just remember like loud white noise, and then I could feel air rushing past my ears, but I could not hear it. I could physically feel it, like air passing my eardrums, but not hearing any of that. It did come back eventually, but ultimately that particular situation scared me enough that I decided concerts were just not for me, and I reduced my live performance attendance significantly after that. I did not want to be deaf before I turned 30, so that was one of the last concerts I ever went to. And I'm not saying that people should just avoid concerts like the plague. What I'm saying is, if you're going to go, use ear protection, and if anyone tries to give you grief, tell them shut up, go deaf on your own. As I said before, Ozzy Osbourne is no stranger to controversy, and I'm not talking about the subject matter of his music. In 1981, Ozzy was in LA to sign a new record deal, and the event included the release of some doves to symbolize peace, I guess. Ozzy was intoxicated at the time, and he decided to grab one of the doves and bite its head off. Then while he was being escorted out of the building, probably because the executives were disgusted with him, he found and grabbed a second dove and did the same thing. The story has been conflated over the years with what may have been a staged incident involving a bat that was thrown on stage, which Ozzy also bit the head off of. The bat in question may have been a rubber prop. The details have been debated over the years. In addition to this, Ozzy has gone on record admitting that he shot and killed 17 pet cats during the 1980s, all while high. Whether it's humans or animals, cruelty is cruelty, and it's not a great look for someone that spent a lifetime preaching, either in interviews or in his music, against needless human deaths due to warmongering, when he doesn't ascribe the same value of life to animals. Say what you will about the human consumption of meat, most of the animals that we have eaten at any point in our lives are usually killed quickly and humanely, not shot and not violently decapitated by someone in a drug-induced frenzy or for a cheap publicity pop. I don't know if Ozzy ever expressed any remorse for these actions, but I've always found it very odd what people are willing to forgive or forget when they're honoring someone's passing. I doubt anyone has raised the amount of vitriol or disgust with Ozzy that people have with the next subject. I just find it very strange. Don't do that. If you have a pet that you don't want to handle, take it to a shelter. They'll give it to another family. Don't be cruel to animals. Finally, Hulk Hogan passed away on July 24th as a result of myocardial infarction, or a heart attack, more simply put. He had undergone spinal fusion surgery a month earlier to repair issues from prior surgeries. His wife Skye has denied that these two issues are related. However, an autopsy has surfaced that Hogan was also suffering from leukemia. Hogan began his career as a wrestler in 1977, working for Championship Wrestling of Florida and then the Continental Wrestling Association, both southern regional promotions in the territorial days of professional wrestling. Hogan was inspired during a talk show appearance to adopt the Hulk persona when the host mentioned that he was actually larger in stature than his other guest for that show, Lou Ferrigno, who played the Incredible Hulk on the 1978 TV show. Hogan toured for a time as Terry the Hulk Boulder alongside his lifelong friend Ed Leslie, most famously known as Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Hogan was introduced to Vince McMahon in 1979 and briefly joined his father Vince McMahon Sr.'s promotion, Capital Wrestling Corporation, before beginning a stint with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Once Vince McMahon assumed full control of the company in 1982, McMahon offered Hogan another contract in 1984 with the expanding World Wrestling Federation brand. McMahon had already left the governing body for the regional promotions at that time, which was the National Wrestling Alliance, and had begun a hostile takeover of other territories by promoting WWF in the regions and drawing away their top talent. If you've seen the documentary on Netflix, McMahon was very upfront about basically shunning or ignoring what was considered taboo actions between regional promotions. You weren't supposed to snipe other people's talent. You weren't supposed to broadcast your wrestling programs in their areas. He did all those things. Rowdy Roddy Piper, Sergeant Slaughter, Ric Flair. These were all guys who made names for themselves in other promotions. And then Vince McMahon sniped all of them and brought them to WWF. So he was pretty ruthless about that. He wanted to make WWF a global brand, basically. Hogan quickly became the top star of WWF, earning his first championship 3 weeks after joining the company. This victory, along with commentator Gorilla Monsoon's pronouncement that Hulkamania is here, helped propel Hogan and the WWF into the stratosphere. Hulk Hogan was known for offering his 3 demandments during promos, those being to train hard, say your prayers, and eat your vitamins. He spent the majority of his 80s run with the WWF as a babyface character, typically pitted against unstoppable monster heels that he would eventually conquer. The most famous of those matches would be his title defense against Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, known for the body slam heard around the world, in which Hogan successfully body slammed Andre, a feat that had supposedly never been done and was sold as such leading up to the match. In truth, Hogan and Andre had wrestled many times in the past, and video evidence of Hogan easily body slamming Andre years earlier exists today. Whatever, it was a promotional angle. They don't necessarily tell you the truth every time they set up a story in professional wrestling. Believe it or not, a lot of it's written. Hogan ultimately left the WWF in 1993 due to a combination of factors. He had begun dipping his toes in acting as a possible career shift. He had done the movie Suburban Commando. And there's another one, I think it's a Christmas-themed one. And he also did the TV show Thunder in Paradise around that time. There was a noticeable decline in the popularity of the Hulkamania gimmick. And he took part in a rather poorly executed talk show appearance on the Arsenio Hall show, in which Hogan was meant to squash concerns of a growing steroid issue within WWF, but his own admission of prescribed steroid use during the interview ultimately hurt not only him, but the WWF brand. In 1994, Hogan joined the rival organization WCW and quickly became the centerpiece in their attempt to become the top wrestling promotion in the US, following a downturn in business for the WWF. A bold idea by executive producer Eric Bischoff led to Hogan's first heel turn in over a decade, fronting the New World Order with fellow former WWF talents Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. The heel turn, as well as the resulting power struggle storyline between the NWO and WCW, and the NWO's appeal as the cool bad guys, would prove to be a massive success, resulting in the WCW overtaking WWF in television ratings for its much ballyhooed 83 consecutive weeks. Hogan would eventually leave WCW in 2000 after a dispute between him and producer Vince Russo, which spilled into the ring as part of a title match, in which Hogan pinned wrestler Jeff Jarrett, who laid down in the ring without so much as a single punch thrown. The disagreement led Hogan to file a defamation lawsuit against Russo, which was dismissed in 2002, but the damage was already done. Vince McMahon would eventually buy out the WCW brand and merge it with the WWF, ending the rival promotion. Hogan continued wrestling in some form for another 19 years, although chronic health issues severely diminished his performance. Hogan is believed to have had at least 25 major surgical procedures performed over his lifetime to address back, hip, knee, and shoulder issues. Due to his chosen finishing move, which involved a sitting leg drop, Hogan had suffered long-term back issues, resulting in at least 10 different procedures to alleviate pain in his back and neck, including the spinal fusion surgery that may have contributed to his death. I won't say that I never liked Hulk Hogan as a kid, but he was never my favorite wrestler. I started watching wrestling in the late 80s or early 90s thanks to the Saturday morning show that they used to run, and by then Hulkamania had just about run its course. My favorite two wrestlers were The Undertaker and Bret the Hitman Hart. Undertaker mainly for the theatricality of his character, and Bret for his actual wrestling ability. I know I saw most of the early WrestleManias by renting them from my local video store, and the first live pay-per-view that I ever saw was the 1992 Royal Rumble, which Hogan was a part of, but he did not win. That was the year that Ric Flair entered the Rumble at something like number 2, and he managed to win the whole thing. I have only ever been to 2 live events, both in the early 90s, and they were both house shows. So neither of them were televised, and I don't remember Hogan being at either one of them. So I don't know if I've ever seen Hogan live. Not just from like signing appearances or wrestling matches. I never saw him. I think I shared this on Nub's Collection when we did the episode for Super WrestleMania. At the first show that I went to, I was with my mother and my older sister. We were actually fairly close to the ring. Maybe 2 or 3 rows back from the front. At one point, Ric Flair comes out for a match, and at the time, Curt Hennig, who wrestled in WWF as Mr. Perfect, was recovering from an injury, and he took on the role of Flair's manager. My sister, who I guess she had the hots for Mr. Perfect, started calling out to him during the match to try to get his attention, and he actually shot a look at her during the show. It's part of the reason why house shows are considered by many to be the best parts of pro wrestling, because the wrestlers are given free rein to interact with the crowd, basically. They're not as bound by a storyline that they must perform or protect. You know, that kind of stuff is usually on televised programs like Raw or SmackDown because they want you to see whatever they're building to for the next major live event, you know, like SummerSlam's coming up this coming weekend. I'm sure they had storylines that they did on Raw and SmackDown that they would never have tried to follow through with at a house show because they have to save that stuff for the most eyeballs possible. The second show that I went to, and this is the reason why I only went to 2 shows, was with my mother and the younger of my 2 sisters. We got seats near the aisle where all the wrestlers entered the arena. At one point, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, came out for a match, and as he passed us, he looked over at my sister, kept walking, and no joke, he did a double take and looked back to check her out. My mother definitely noticed, and she said we couldn't go to any more live events. So yeah, screw my sisters, take me! As with the previous 2 gentlemen we highlighted, Hogan was certainly not without skeletons in his closet. Along with the steroid scandal, a lawsuit that he settled with talk show host Richard Belzer after Hogan unintentionally knocked Belzer unconscious, demonstrating a chokehold, and a 1995 sexual assault allegation that was settled out of court. In 2002, Hogan was involved in a lawsuit with blog site Gawker after they obtained and published a sex tape featuring Hogan and Heather Clem, ex-wife of radio personality Bubba the Love Sponge, without Hogan's consent. Hogan ultimately won and was awarded $140 million, which helped facilitate Gawker parent company Gawker Media filing for bankruptcy in 2016. In 2015, National Enquirer obtained and released another sex tape in which Hogan was recorded expressing disgust with his daughter Brooke's ongoing relationship with a black man and uttering multiple racial slurs. The fallout included WWE terminating an existing contract with Hogan and the termination of toy and merchandise production deals with Mattel, Target, Toys R Us, and Walmart. Hogan would appear on ABC in August of 2015 to beg forgiveness for his actions and explain the casual use of the terminology in the neighborhood he grew up in, although former friends and neighbors have disputed these claims. The pallor of the incident hung heavy over Hogan's last televised appearance with WWE, a short segment on the first episode of Raw on Netflix, in which Hogan came out to promote his new beer brand and was greeted with a chorus of boos. Ultimately, Hulk Hogan is a large part of the reason professional wrestling is in the state it's in today. His initial fame brought national attention to a previously regional form of entertainment, and without a star as transformative as Hogan, wrestling might still have been the exclusive domain of high school auditoriums and backyards. And Hogan didn't just buoy the WWE, he did the same thing with WCW, and to a lesser extent, TNA. I can't pretend to know how Hogan genuinely felt about his comments or his attitude towards the black community. There are plenty of black wrestlers and athletes that accepted his apology and believed him to be a good person at heart, and just as many that doubted his sincerity. My knee-jerk reaction is to take the apology at face value and believe that he didn't mean what he said, but I wasn't necessarily his biggest fan to begin with, and I don't know if he was that willing to lie to people's faces. His death was still sad. I'm glad that WWE and New Japan Pro Wrestling and TNA and even AEW, who he never actually worked for, all chose to honor him in some fashion, with prepared comments, or 10-bell salutes, or video packages. Say what you will about the heart and mind of Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan was too important to wrestling to ignore at his passing. I think it would have been an extremely poor taste if, right after that happened, they decided on WWE to just kind of glaze over, pretend it didn't even happen. I think whatever vitriol people have expressed at their decision to honor him after his passing would have been doubly as loud if they didn't say a single thing. So I am happy that they at least mentioned him in the opening of both Raw and SmackDown, and I think NXT also did something. So yeah, they paid their due. I would not be surprised if there is something very small that they add maybe to the beginning of the live event that's coming up this weekend, SummerSlam. It's so close to when he passed away. There's no way they don't have something, maybe just a short video package between matches that they decide to play. I'm sure they're going to do something. All right, I have rambled on long enough. Let's do some final thoughts on the WWF WrestleMania Challenge game. The game does the best it can with the limited button assignment. A does a punch, holding A does a secondary blow like a kick or a headbutt. You press B to do grappling moves like body slams or gorilla press slams. And if you grapple an enemy from behind, it does a completely different move, like an atomic leg drop. They gave most of the wrestlers a special move, not necessarily a finisher, that you would perform by pressing A and B at the same time. The problem is it drains your health every time you use it, and the enemy can dodge the hit, so it was very unreliable to use. They had a decent spread of wrestlers, although I would have appreciated a few more. 8 is probably a lot for the limited space on an NES cart, but come on, you find a way to put a couple more in. I like that they included short samples of each wrestler's entrance music. Admittedly, they did not include very much. It would play for maybe 10, 15 seconds, and then it would skip to someone else's. So clearly they didn't write full tracks, they just had snippets. The running game is pointless because there is no clotheslines. There's no running attacks of any kind. It literally just lets you move across the ring faster. And getting out of the ring was an absolute nightmare. I tried many different times to get in the ring because there's a specific button combination you do. You have to hold the D-pad in the direction of the ring, which, by the way, it moved at an angle. So, like, if you held up, you moved up and to the left. If you held down, you moved down and to the right. So trying to figure out the direction to get into the ring was already a pain in the ass. But then you also had to hit A and B at the same time. And I could never get it to work, ever. They needed to make that easier. It was just too difficult. The computer AI was insanely good at slipping away from grapples, which did not feel fair, and they always got up way too fast. In just about every wrestling game you're ever going to play, the stamina bar determines how soon you can get back up. I don't know why they decided to let wrestlers get up as fast as possible, no matter how low their health was. They needed to make it more closely matching what your health level was. One thing they did do as far as health is, your character in ring moved faster if they had higher health. So if you were starting to pummel someone who had really low health and they wanted to run away, they couldn't because you were going to be able to move faster than them. The wrestlers mostly had access to their finishers, although some did not. Brutus Beefcake had a sleeper hold. Jim Duggan did his 3-point stance. Randy Savage had a flying elbow drop. Good luck getting it to land because the enemy always got out of the way before you could. And Rick Rude did the Rude Awakening. Bizarrely enough, Hulk Hogan does not have a leg drop, despite multiple people in the game having access to the move. Similarly, Ultimate Warrior could not do the Warrior Splash, even though other wrestlers had that move. I would just add, though, that one of the things that the game rather cleverly played into was the fact that Andre the Giant was already suffering from declining health and limited mobility around the time that they were developing the game, so the late 80s. And they changed his moveset so that not only could he not run in the ring, it didn't matter how many times he double tapped in any direction, he wasn't going to run. He also could not climb turnbuckles. And if you did try to climb the turnbuckles, he would simply lean against them, catch his breath, which is something that he absolutely did at the tail end of his career. He was really struggling the last year or so in the ring. Basically, his moveset was down to club someone over the back of their shoulders and neck or headbutt them. He couldn't do much else. He was severely limited at the end of his life when he was trying to wrestle. My regret for WWF WrestleMania Challenge is that I bothered renting the game at all. I don't remember going back to this one very often. And the limited moveset, the awful mechanics for entering and exiting the ring, and dodgeable power moves meant that the AI was always at an advantage against a human opponent. I had a reasonable amount of fun with these Super Nintendo WWF games. I cannot imagine ever going back to this one. It is absolutely a dud. Whoever at Rare helped put it together, they needed to do just a few minutes of research to learn every wrestler's signature moves, not just some of them. You do not put Hulk Hogan on the cover of your video game where all the characters get their finishing move and not give him his finishing move. And it wasn't a mystery. He had used the leg drop for years at that point as his finisher, and for whatever reason they were like, oh, we don't need it this time. It was so goofy. Yeah, this is not the best wrestling game you're ever going to play, especially not the best WWF wrestling game you're ever going to play. Avoid it like the plague. There are better options. If you want something that's maybe still not the best game in the world, but definitely better than this one, go check out WWF Royal Rumble or WWF Raw on the Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis. Those are much better games. That's going to do it for this episode of Rental Regrets. As always, I do appreciate each of you watching, and I will see you next time.